What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Salt Lake City Fantasy Basketball League. I'm going to introduce you to the league in this video and also show you some tips and tricks about how to be successful this season. So this right here is our league Facebook page. This is the primary source for league announcements, um, polls that we'll vote on as a league, trash talk, any messaging that we do as a league. This is primarily where it will take place. So check it often. Make sure your notifications are on so you can stay up to date with important announcements that'll come as the season goes on. As you look here at the top of the page, there's a link to a few different important sites. We do have a league Twitter page. I recommend you follow that for updates if you use Twitter. We also have our League Safe page where we all paid into the league, and that's where the payouts will happen at the end of the season. Right here, we also have our league office. This is where the fantasy magic happens. On the league office homepage, there's a league manager's note. I'll update this a couple times a year, hopefully more, every couple weeks or so. Basically, I'll just have some updates about what's happening in the NBA, what's happening in our league, maybe some shout outs to some players or just other news or whatever. So check that often. We also have transaction logs. Any trades or ads or drops will be right there. And of course, there's the league chat, but no one uses that. Like I said, the Facebook is the primary source for all the messaging. They just updated their interface for this ESPN Fantasy, so I think when trades happen, they'll be right here. As a league, we can vote to approve or veto those trades. If we think there's any collusion or just some sketchy behavior with the trade, we can veto it. It requires 4 votes. It hasn't happened very often, but there have been a couple times in the past. Just based on things that were happening that season, the trade has been vetoed. There is also a smartphone app that they just updated as well. That's pretty handy for managing things on the go, but I like to use the desktop version of their website. So if you come up here, the primary thing to do when you're managing a fantasy basketball team is just to make sure that you set your rosters. So you'll go to this My Team tab up in the top left, and you want to make sure that anyone who's playing is starting. So anyone who has a game that day should be starting. You can set it days in advance. I generally go through about a week in advance and set all my lineups just to make sure I don't forget. Sometimes it'll fit really nicely into this spot here, but other times everybody might be playing, so you'll have to be a little more strategic about who you start and who you bench. There is also an injured reserve spot for any players that are out for an extended period of time. You come up here to this Manage IR, and you can put them in that spot and pick up another player. But just note that when that person becomes healthy again, you'll have to drop someone in order to pull them off of the injured reserve. So while you're managing your lineups, you'll also want to keep an eye on your matchup. As you can see, after one day, it looks like the other person hasn't had any games yet. But basically, you want to make sure that your team is performing well. You want to win more categories than you tie or lose, which is pretty obvious. But this is wins, losses, ties. At the end of the week, if you're winning more than you're losing or tying in, then you will win that week's matchup. So if you come over here to standings, it'll show you how many matchups have been won, lost, or tied. The tiebreaker this season is points. So if everyone is tied in an equal amount of categories for a matchup, then the winning team will be the team that has more points scored. Generally, at the end of the season, the division leaders, that's a great spot to be in. You'll generally get some good money back, as well as a good playoff spot. So you'll focus on your division primarily throughout the season. And then you can also just kind of see where your team is in regards to certain stat categories, and even transactions over here. You can see some teams have already had some adds and drops. I've seen some teams that have had hundreds of transactions throughout the season, and I've seen other teams that have had less than 10. Both of them have been successful before, so more transactions doesn't necessarily mean that your team will do better. But it does show that you're a very active owner, which is not a bad thing. We will have some trophies and stuff that we'll vote on or that we'll give out throughout the season. And the most active owners will definitely be getting a lot of those trophies. So more about that later on. But if your team is, if you have a player that gets injured, you just need to make some adjustments to your roster. You can come over here to add some players. It'll show you who's available. In some cases, they'll be on waivers. In this case, it basically means that whoever's higher on the waiver order will get that player. You can come here and look at the waiver order. It's determined kind of by the draft. Basically, for example, if Team Nelson and Team Wetzel were both wanting to make claims on a player, Team Nelson would be able to get the player because he's higher on the waiver order, but then he would drop down to the bottom of the list. And it kind of rotates just to make sure that things are more fair and that a person who's more active than someone else can't necessarily always be getting the most available players. There is also a list of undroppables. These are just players that ESPN considers undroppable for fair play. These are also updated with injuries and stuff as the season goes on. So if you have any of these people, you can't drop them off of your roster unless maybe they get injured or something. But that's the basics of it. I'll post some more videos as the season goes on with some more tips and tricks. We're just barely getting started, but I think it'll be a great year. And if you have any questions, like always, feel free to ask me or shoot me a message. But I hope everyone has a good time this season and good luck.